Hello, dear listeners. Before we dive in, know that this story is presented using an advanced level of English for those striving for true fluency. You will encounter sophisticated vocabulary, complex grammatical structures, and rich descriptive language throughout the narrative. Phrases like existential motivation and pristine hyperpolyglot aren't just engaging, they're your next step toward English mastery. Listen closely, perhaps multiple times, to absorb the high-level language and elevate your own command of the language. This is your Masterclass. Today I will reveal an esoteric linguistic secret buried within the walls of the Vatican. Meet Giuseppe Mezzofanti, a man about whom historians still speak with profound incredulity. An Italian cardinal in the 19th century who never left Italy, yet he spoke an unprecedented 38 languages fluently and could hold conversations in dozens of other dialects. He is a hyperpolyglot in the most pristine sense of the word, an enigma whom his contemporaries called the living dictionary. When we attempt to learn a second, third, or fifth language, our brain often puts up a fight. It's a cognitive barrier, a psychological fortress most of us cannot breach. But Mezzofanti, it seems, cracked that code long before modern psychology was born. His secret wasn't genius. His secret was ruthless efficiency and human compassion. He created a method that turns fear into a catalyst for learning, one that can deconstruct your own linguistic resistance. If you're striving for true mastery, this story is your roadmap. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next mystery. Giuseppe was born in 1774 into a humble carpenter's family in Bologna. His path to linguistic phenomenon began not with a desire for power or fame, but with sheer chance. His father wanted him to be a carpenter. But one day, while playing near the local school, young Giuseppe eavesdropped on Latin and Greek lessons being taught by the local priest. To everyone's astonishment, within a few weeks, he was flawlessly repeating them, never having seen a textbook. The teacher was so impressed by his auditory memory and instinctive sense of language rhythm that he took him under his wing. This became his providence. From that moment, Mezzofanti understood that for him, language was a melody and not just a grammatical formula. Mezzofanti was an erudite and phenomenal student. He immersed himself in classical philology, but his passion quickly moved beyond antiquity. By the age of 19, he was already teaching Arabic and Greek at the University of Bologna. His colleagues viewed languages merely as an intellectual exercise, but for Giuseppe, every language was an indispensable key to the mental landscape of another civilization. Early in his teaching career, he turned his attention to Bologna's Jewish community. He didn't just study Hebrew, he mastered Yiddish, a pursuit that was profoundly unconventional for an academic of his rank. Why? Because he understood that the living language spoken in the market holds more truth than the dead texts. This was his first breakthrough, a rejection of academic dogma in favor of practical immersion and conversational authenticity. He quickly commanded all the Romance and Germanic languages: French, Spanish, German, Portuguese. His uniqueness lay in the fact that he didn't just memorize words. He created a system of interconnections in his mind. In this system, each language wasn't an isolated cabinet, but an interlinked department of a large library. This allowed him to instantly switch between them without cognitive resistance. But the world outside Italy was inaccessible to him. His work was confined to his university chair. He compensated for this with an absolute immersion in written sources. He grasped that translation is the nuanced transfer of an existential experience, not a simple word swap. It was during this period that he was noticed by Lord Byron, who was living in Italy at the time. Byron, a great traveler himself, was utterly astonished by his abilities. Byron, with his characteristic wit, described Mezzofanti as a walking library. He added that the cardinal had irreparably spoiled his life by never leaving Italy, for he would have been a wonderful translator for any embassy. This was the highest possible compliment from a cynical aristocrat. When Napoleon's troops invaded northern Italy, Mezzofanti refused to swear allegiance to the new French regime and was dismissed from his university post. This crisis, however, opened up a new, extreme linguistic laboratory for him: field hospitals. The world came to Mezzofanti. Following the Napoleonic Wars, Italy was transformed into a melting pot. Prisoners of war, sailors, merchants, and missionaries from all corners of the globe poured into the ports and hospitals. This was a goldmine for his linguistic instinct. His list of achievements was both enviable and absurd. He commanded all the main European languages, but the true marvels were the exotic languages he mastered through his encounters with the imprisoned. These included Albanian, Maltese, Armenian, Turkish, Persian, Farsi, Gujarati, and even Chinese Mandarin. He also commanded dead and ancient tongues like Coptic and Syriac. He was living proof that his brain functioned as a universal linguistic processor. His secret laboratory wasn't a classroom. It was the hospital wards and the cells of the condemned in Rome and Bologna. Mezzofanti, as a priest, had a higher duty: to administer confession and last rites. For a soul facing death, a sincere confession could only happen in their native tongue. This was the strongest existential motivation. This wasn't just a lesson. It was a life-critical mission. He would go to a person who spoke, for example, Maltese or Coptic, and knew he had only a few days to absorb enough to understand their sins. The motivation wasn't academic. It was existential. Either you master the language or you betray your spiritual mission. This was the ultimate catalyst for the brain. There's a dramatic story about two foreign sailors condemned for piracy. When Mezzofanti first visited them, he realized he didn't know their language, a rare dialect, perhaps South Indian or Filipino. He promised to return. He spent the entire night studying their dialect from a single text fragment, and most likely, the Lord's Prayer. The next morning, he freely confessed both pirates in their native tongue, giving them last peace. This incident became legend. Another famous story involves two Chinese sailors arrested in a port. Mezzofanti spent 3 consecutive days with them, using them as living textbooks. By the 3rd day, he could converse with them in Mandarin. One sailor even recorded, "This man speaks our language as if he were born in Beijing, but his words sound a little like an old scholar's." Mezzofanti was a master of mimicry and linguistic empathy. He was once approached by a wealthy lady whose maid spoke only the Sardinian dialect, a complex mix of Latin, Italian, and Spanish. Mezzofanti had never studied Sardinian, but promised to hear the girl's confession by Easter. He came to their house every evening and learned the dialect from the maid herself. In just 2 weeks, he mastered Sardinian enough to fulfill his commitment, once again transforming a spiritual necessity into a linguistic challenge. He used every city corner, every human tragedy, as a priceless lesson. He wasn't ashamed to learn languages by conversing with beggars, soldiers, and the condemned. For him, there were no low or unworthy sources of knowledge. In 1833, at the age of 59, Mezzofanti was called to Rome and became the chief keeper of the Vatican Library. In this position, his linguistic unicum became indispensable. The Vatican Library received and housed manuscripts and documents from the entire planet. Mezzofanti was the only person who could decipher, catalog, and process this infinite multiplicity of languages, including dead and archaic dialects. His duties included reading texts in languages that no one else in the world could verify, such as certain Native American dialects or exotic Asian scripts. Even as a cardinal, Mezzofanti received countless visitors who traveled from across the globe to test his abilities. Pope Gregory XVI once gathered a group of international students and ambassadors to stage an impromptu exam. They began speaking to him simultaneously, launching a true linguistic fusillade in 6 languages: German, Portuguese, Greek, Armenian, Turkish, and English. Mezzofanti masterfully switched between them, answering each person in their native tongue with impeccable accuracy, showing no sign of confusion. This event became the pinnacle of his fame. There is an anecdote about the Russian scholar Alexander Starchevsky, who decided to stump the cardinal. Starchevsky spoke to Mezzofanti in Ukrainian, or Ruthenian, as it was then known. Mezzofanti admitted he hadn't yet had time to study it, but asked Starchevsky to return in 2 weeks. When the scholar came back, the cardinal met him, fluently conversing in perfect Ukrainian, showcasing his ability for lightning-fast assimilation of Slavic languages. His mastery wasn't limited to standard languages. Mezzofanti could distinguish and imitate regional dialects with such accuracy that native speakers often asked him which specific region of their country he hailed from. He understood that accent and dialect were a cultural code, and copying them was an act of deep respect and empathy. Even in old age, he never stopped learning. His personal archive contained handwritten flashcards for studying such unexpected languages as Tagalog, Philippines, Algonquin, North America, and even Cornish, a British dialect. His passion for language was unquenchable. What is the testament Mezzofanti left for those who seek true language mastery? His greatest lesson lies not in his innate talent, but in his methodology, a principle we now call deep immersive learning. This is where the real key lies. Principle 1. Life-critical motivation, the life-critical catalyst. This is the foundation of his method. Language should not be a hobby, but an instrument of survival or the fulfillment of a higher mission. Mezzofanti didn't learn a language for a grade. He learned it to save a soul. Create a context where failure means a real loss, emotional, professional, or spiritual. This forces the brain to recalibrate from surface memorization to deep assimilation. Use your fear of failure as the strongest kata. Principle 2. Melodic familiarity and pattern repetition. The melodic familiarity loop. Mezzofanti used familiar religious texts, like the Lord's Prayer or the Apostles' Creed, translated into the target language. These texts were reliably familiar to him by rhythm and semantic content. He asked the native speaker to repeat them over and over. This way, he wasn't just learning words, but identifying language patterns, fixed phrases, word sequences, and rhythmic accents. This allowed him to deconstruct the grammar without learning it through abstract rules. Context was his textbook. Principle 3. Flashcard organization and analysis. The flashcard and analysis system. Contrary to romantic notions, Mezzofanti was a fastidious and disciplined learner. His archive contained thousands of handwritten cards, what we would call flashcards today. They contained not just words, but parallel texts, grammatical comparisons, and vocabulary lists he created himself. He analyzed the language structure, seeking universal elements and points of intersection with languages he already knew. This accelerated the process through knowledge transfer. Principle 4. Strict discipline and self-immersion. The monastic discipline. His lifestyle was devoted to learning. Mezzofanti reportedly slept only 3 to 4 hours a day. Even during the harsh alpine winters of northern Italy, he never allowed himself to light a fire while studying. This wasn't just eccentricity, it was a focusing technique that trained the brain to work under extreme conditions and maximum concentration. When alone, he consciously thought in each of his languages in succession to keep them active, preventing cognitive stagnation. Principle 5. Linguistic empathy. The mimicry of the soul. Mezzofanti was a master of mimicry. He didn't just reproduce sounds, he absorbed their culture and mentality. His impeccable accent was the result not of innate gift, but of conscious copying of the native speaker's rhythm and tone. For him, language was a persona. When he spoke, he tried to feel like a Turk, a Chinese person, or an Englishman, adopting their way of thinking. This ensured the profound authenticity of his communication. His legacy is living proof. Language is not just a set of rules. It's a historical artifact and a living connection to another human being. Embrace the language not as a subject, but as a persona and a mission of survival. So, what will you choose? Which language will be your next mission of survival? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of true hyperpolyglottism, subscribe to the channel and don't miss the next mystery. His legacy is an undeniable challenge to all modern language learners. Mezzofanti proved that true mastery comes from existential necessity and profound linguistic empathy. It's not enough to memorize grammar. You must embrace the language as a mission of survival and a new persona. So stop treating language as a tedious chore and begin treating it as your next great adventure. Which language will become your mission of survival? Share your thoughts and personal goals in the comments below. If this story unlocked a new way of thinking for you, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for the next great mystery.